Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Elko, Texas A&M, wrapping up fall camp. Want to take a look back at the last 3 to 4 weeks and talk about some players that really emerged coming out of fall camp, guys that really asserted themselves as what sounds to be difference makers for this Texas A&M program heading into 2024. We said, kind of all offseason, that this Texas A&M program during fall camp is going to be one of the more fascinating teams to follow because you have so many new faces, so much injection of talent throughout this Texas A&M roster, and seemingly position battles all over the football field. Want to highlight some guys that really emerged. Excited to get into it. Now, before we do, and as always, one of the Texas A&M fans that I know, just like myself, every single morning I sat down to read the fall camp notes. Would love to hear some of the names that kind of stood out to you guys in the comment section. We're going to talk about 5 to 6 players that, for me personally, I got most excited about. And there's probably a list of 10 to 15 that you really could highlight. So would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And of course, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The amount of support from the Texas A&M fans really all offseason, as we've talked, the recruiting trail, the transfer portal, 2024. This program has been a blast to talk about, and the amount of support's been absolutely amazing. Appreciate you guys. So if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I'm going to put a disclaimer right at the top. We're not going to talk about any defensive linemen. We've spent so much time talking about the defensive line for Texas A&M over the last couple of weeks and months that, look, we know that this is going to be one of the best units, if not the best defensive line that we see in the country. Let's highlight some other position groups that we probably had more question marks about heading into fall camp. And I think the number one position group was the offensive line. Somebody who sounds to be a real winner is Chase Basantis. I think the big storyline is Chase Basantis is back playing the position that he should have been playing all along. That's on the inside at guard. The mismanagement of this Texas A&M coaching staff over the last couple of years, specifically on the offensive line, it was a disaster. Look, Chase Basantis could be a solid tackle. He could be an All-American guard. And the fact that they were playing a true freshman out of position at tackle in the SEC last year, it just made me scratch my head. And you read the reports of Chase Basantis playing guard and say, all right, physically imposing, a guy that can move people off the line of scrimmage, obviously going to hold up in pass pro because he is a phenomenal athlete. Chase Basantis is a mauler offensive lineman. You want him playing in a phone booth. Yes, he could be a solid tackle for Texas A&M. He's going to be an elite guard for Texas A&M. That's what you're hearing coming out of fall camp. So with all the question marks you might have about Texas A&M on the offensive line, it sounds like you are going to have truly a dominant guard in Chase Basantis. I think that's a really big storyline. Second offensive lineman I do want to talk about is Arage Reed-Adams. And why I want to talk about Arage Reed-Adams is the conversation around Texas A&M is, hey, what is our best 5 going to be on the offensive line? There is a lot of shuffling. There's a lot of different position battles, guys working at different positions. I think what's so massive about adding Arage Reed-Adams and what he's come in and done is, do I think Arage Reed-Adams is going to be an All-American? Like I think Chase Basantis has that capability? No, probably not. But he's going to be a solid offensive lineman, and he can be a solid offensive lineman at 2 different positions, right? They're working him at guard, but they're also working him in at tackle. Talk about getting your best 5 on the football field, having a guy that you feel comfortable starting at 2 different positions, whether it's at guard, whether it's at right tackle. That's a really big storyline. And so you look at this Texas A&M offensive line and say, all right, Trey Zune's going to be our left tackle. Chase Basantis is going to be one of our guards. Arage Reed-Adams sounds to be a starter for Texas A&M, whether it's at right tackle, whether it's on inside at the guard spot. I think having that, versatile chess piece on the offensive line that, again, is he going to be a first-team All-SEC offensive lineman? No, probably not. But he's going to be a very reliable, solid offensive lineman at 2 different positions. I think that's a really big storyline for Texas A&M, considering, all the questions we have about what the starting 5 is going to be. Having a guy that can start at multiple different positions, really big storyline. Third guy I want to talk about, true freshman. We've talked a lot about him over the last couple of weeks, or really a couple of days. Freshman Terry Bussey. Now, what intrigues me most about Terry Bussey is Mike Elko is obviously being asked about how Terry Bussey is going to be used. Mike Elko has been very coy. I don't blame him for being very coy. I mean, you have your one of, if not the biggest game of the season. I truly think it might be. I know Texas at the end of the season, but You look at, like what Texas A&M can be if they win that football game against Notre Dame and kind of go off to the races. I think that Notre Dame game might be the biggest game of the season. You have a guy in Terry Bussey who I would bet is going to play a couple of snaps on the offensive side of the football. I'm not sure what it's going to look like. I'm not sure how many snaps. It's not going to be a lot, but I would guess you're going to play him. And Mike Elko has been, very coy about, hey, Terry Bussey's really talented. We're still trying to figure out how to use him. You look at Terry Bussey and say, one, even before the injury to Reuben Owens, we kind of knew that this kid was going to get involved in a lot of different ways. You go back to some of the fall camp stuff we've talked about. Terry Bussey is going to be an elite returner for Texas A&M. Took a kick return, back for a touchdown in one of the fall camp scrimmages. This kid might be the best football player with the ball in his hands on this Texas A&M roster. Now, over the years, is he going to play defensive back? That would probably be our guess. That's what it sounds like. You have that week 1 matchup against Notre Dame where it's going to come down to the wire. There's a reason that spread is 1.5 points. If you can figure out a way to use Terry Bussey only 3 to 4 times on offense and create one game-changing play, that could lead you to a win in that football game against Notre Dame. I think you're going to see that from Terry Bussey. He sounds like just too talented of a football player to keep off the field. And I think what's so exciting about Terry Bussey is not only is he elite with the football in his hands, the Texas A&M fans know he played quarterback at the high school level. Now, is he an elite thrower of the football? No. Can he get it done throwing the football? Absolutely. And so if you mix Terry Bussey into some wildcat sets, maybe run the ball the first 2 times he's on the field, and then maybe have one of those plays that if the opportunity presents itself, he can push the ball down the field. I wonder if Texas A&M has something kind of planned week 1 against Notre Dame. I think the massive advantage Texas A&M has is, hey, Notre Dame's not sure how they're going to use Terry Bussey. We've never seen any film of Terry Bussey at the collegiate level yet. And so I think Terry Bussey is this wild card that I think could provide a massive play for Texas A&M in that Notre Dame game. And again, Mike Elko's not saying much. I don't blame him for not saying much. I think we got to keep our eyes out on Terry Bussey week 1 against Notre Dame. And he, again, from what you're hearing out of fall camp, he just sounds like a difference maker with the football in his hands. Next guy I want to talk about, and one of, if not the most fascinating storyline coming out of Texas A&M's fall camp was, all right, who's going to be that linebacker 2 next to Torian York? I'll just kind of raise my hand and say I penciled in Solomon DeShields when he transferred over from Pitt. I think Solomon DeShields has played a lot of football. He's that reliable linebacker 2 that you're just going to feel good about playing next to Torian York. And then you get into fall camp, you start reading some of the notes and say, Damen Sanford sounds like he's going to be the guy at that linebacker 2 position. Damen Sanford, one, if he's out playing guys like Solomon DeShields and Scooby Williams, who've played a lot of football at the Power 5 level, one, that's a good sign for Damen Sanford. But I think more importantly, this kid was another one of those kind of hidden gems for Texas A&M in the 2023 class where you go back to the film, this kid was an edge rusher, played overhang linebacker, played so many different positions at the high school level. You kind of knew he wasn't going to be a year 1 guy. He came in 6'2", 205 pounds. You needed to add a little bit of weight to the frame, and then you needed him to kind of just pick a position. Now he's going to play that off-ball linebacker spot. It sounds like he's really putting it together. I think the fact that I guess where I'll kind of wind it down here is the fact that Damen Sanford has come in and outplayed Scooby Williams and outplayed Solomon DeShields should make Texas A&M fans really excited about what this kid can be at that off-ball linebacker spot next to Torian York. That was one of the biggest questions that we had coming into fall camp, and it sounds like one of those questions that we seem to get answered heading into 2024. Last guy I want to talk about, another really exciting storyline, is Tyreek Chappelle. Another one of those big question marks was, hey, what is the best unit going to look like for this Texas A&M secondary? You move Bryce Anderson back to the safety spot, which I think a lot of Texas A&M fans are excited about. We kind of trust Mike Elko in terms of the management of that defensive back room. And Tyreek Chappelle goes from, starting for Texas A&M as boundary cornerback to kicking inside to that nickel position. That's probably his best role in this Texas A&M defense, where you look at Texas A&M's boundary cornerbacks, it's pretty clear what Mike Elko wants. He wants long, physical boundary cornerbacks. Tyreek Chappelle, a really good football player that's played good football for Texas A&M, is not that prototypical boundary cornerback that Mike Elko is looking for. Plus, you're already loaded in the boundary cornerback spot. You talk about BJ Mays or Donovan Sanders, Des Ricks, Will Lee. It's a really loaded boundary cornerback spot. You might have had some question marks about that nickel position. I think Tyreek Chappelle is probably at his best playing that nickel role. I think they had to play him at boundary cornerback last year because they didn't have that many options last year. I think this is another example of why do we believe in Mike Elko? Because he's going to put players in the best spots to be successful, something that we didn't see under Jimbo Fisher, where you had a ton of talented players. They never seemed to be in the right spots and never seemed to be in spots where they could excel the most. And Tyreek Chappelle is probably going to excel the most at that nickel corner spot. And to hear him kicking down there, I think that's really exciting. Kind of gives you a little bit of insight in terms of how this secondary position might look for Texas A&M. We always said it going into fall camp, it's too talented, it's too experienced for it to be a bad unit. I think our question was, what does the best form of Texas A&M secondary look like? I would probably agree that's with Tyreek Chappelle kind of working into that nickel. We'll see how it looks against Notre Dame, but I think that could be a really big advantage for Texas A&M, where you look at how Texas A&M's defense matches up against Notre Dame. One, we got massive question marks about Notre Dame on the offensive line. We think this defensive line is going to be one of the best units in the country. And I think secondly, Notre Dame doesn't have a ton of proven commodities in the wide receiver room that can strike fear into this Texas A&M secondary. If you have a defensive back room that can be really sticky against these Notre Dame wide receivers, I think that's a really big storyline for Texas A&M going into that week one matchup. And those are the names that I wanted to talk about. Again, we left out the defensive line just because, look, we know that defensive line is going to be good. We've heard the rumblings about DJ Hicks putting it together. I probably should have put him on that list because I'm really excited about what he can do for Texas A&M, getting that body right. But I wanted to highlight some of the other position groups that we probably had more question marks about heading into fall camp. These are the guys that you kind of routinely start seeing popping up in the fall scrimmage intel and the fall camp intel reports. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.